everyone, to our Enterprise Tomorrow conversation series. And for this session, we're privileged to have Andrew Chan from ACI, and I'd like to welcome you to the talk, Andrew. And before we begin and before we ask any questions, perhaps, Andrew, you could introduce yourself a little bit and share with us your background.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me, David. It's a real pleasure to be here. I run a company called ACI HR Solutions, and it's a recruitment firm that specializes in the travel and hospitality sector, which obviously at the moment it's pretty hard hit with COVID. I've have 3 offices across Asia Pacific, namely Singapore, Hong Kong, and Sydney. With a specific focus on the travel and hospitality sector. It's my background, which has been in airlines and hotels, and so all the consultants that work within ACI all come from the sector.
Great, thank you very much, Andrew. I guess the first question I'd like to start with, that probably is being the talk of everyone's minds, is what are the challenges that you've seen in this new normal? I know you're in Hong Kong, and been probably in the thick of things over there as well. If you could share a little bit about the challenges that you've seen, especially if you talk to your clients. What are these challenges that organizations are facing in the new normal?
Yeah, and I don't even know if we've reached a new normal yet, David. And I think we're probably on that journey and on that path to new normal. Obviously, the challenges at the moment for many over the last 12, 13 months has been adjusting to a hybrid work model. I'm actually in Singapore. I normally split my time between Singapore and Hong Kong. But at the moment, for the last 14 months, I've been stuck in Singapore. Obviously, with border closures and travel restrictions, that's obviously the biggest challenge for many businesses at the moment. But from a working perspective, in Singapore, I know that the preset here is still, if you can work from home, you work from home, and that's the directive from the government bodies. So, for many organizations, they've been thrust into a work from home or hybrid model for almost 12 months now. And I would say thrust because whilst bigger organizations have probably somewhat experience with managing a workforce that is either remote or has the capability of working from home, many didn't. So there was probably no playbook to it, and it was sort of make it up as we went along. We're 12 months into it now, but I certainly still see many challenges for organizations that still are stuck with somewhat of a hybrid workforce.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it certainly has created a lot of challenges. But I think a lot of people are also saying it's created a lot of opportunities, hasn't it?
Well, there's obviously positives and negatives to situations, and I think for many companies, and particularly with the younger generation and next generation coming in, that workforce flexibility was always something that was increasing and more in demand. So in a lot of ways, COVID has obviously pushed that along quicker, and particularly here in Asia, because I think with organizations in the West, they were probably more adapt and heading that way. But I think with Asian businesses, it's still far more traditional. It's there are certainly countries where you still literally have to sort of clock in and clock off kind of a thing, right? So I think particularly here in Asia, there is more of that challenge of that hybrid working model.
Right. Yeah, I can see it's definitely bulldozing some of the traditional views of how the workforce should behave, and you don't have that choice anymore.
Yeah,
you've got to got to adjust, don't you? So I guess, as you know, Entimo, is very focused in the area of innovating in performance management. So, what I'd like to ask you as well, Andrew, is how do you see this hybrid work from home model creating challenges for the area of performance management?
Well, that's probably been the biggest challenge for an organization, right? Is how do you actually manage a workforce, and how do you actually manage your employees that you don't physically see? Um, I think in sales roles and marketing roles, it's probably a little bit easier because you're used to them being out of the office and having, um, a sales and performance driven KPI and targets. But
Yeah,
many of the other, I guess, employees in administrative and operations type roles, for many organizations, there's never been any key performance matrix set for those roles.
right,
So again, in the last 12 months, they've either had to, I guess, quickly come up with one, or from what I've seen, many organizations, still don't have any indicators at the moment. And I think they're still working towards the day that they could actually physically come back to an office.
right. Yeah, I was reading collaboration software like Microsoft Teams or Zoom was flying off the shelves, and they were tripling or quadrupling their numbers last year. But is that all there is? For work from home, and is it all just about collaboration?
Yeah, it's not, because I think the irony is here. I'm talking to you on Zoom, but obviously the phenomenon now is called as Zoom fatigue, right? So it can't just be about you having that daily or regular Zoom meeting with your employees. And I think from what we've seen on the recruitment side, and when we do come across candidates, the complaints and that we often hear nowadays is that we feel like we're actually more tired and working more and longer hours than we were in an office environment. And we have seen some genuine stress when it comes to employees. And one of the funny things that I've sort of seen during the last 12 months with COVID, or surprising thing, I should say, not necessarily funny, but our candidate interest, or the number of candidates actually approaching us, and not because they've been retrenched or that they lost their jobs. The candidates that were actually still in employment approaching us looking for new opportunities actually hasn't gone down that much, if at all. In fact, it's probably has gone up. So
Right.
people that are still actually in employment are actually looking for new opportunities, because stress level has actually gone up, and in most cases they've probably have lost colleagues, and their salary has been affected. So they're probably working more and earning less. So that stress level has actually gone up.
Right.
And that's one thing that employers probably need to be conscious about.
Right. Right. And I guess as an organization as well, employee health, employee resilience, and engagement, probably really important indicators or levers that they need to think about more that they didn't think about in the past, right?
Absolutely. And I think many organizations probably wouldn't even know where to start in measuring that. I think it's probably easier to sweep that under the carpet at the moment. But yeah, absolutely hit that on the head, David. I mean, how do you start measuring employee health and stress levels? Many organizations probably don't.
Right. Yeah. Um, Shifting focus now to another product area for Entimo is our careers management, and succession planning solution that we have. obviously right in your area of business. Andrew, if you could share some thoughts on the challenges now in this career and succession planning, how that's being impacted by the whole work from home phenomena and the lockdowns that have happened.
Yeah, and that's another area that I see would be of interest to both employees and employers, because from an employee point of view, if all of a sudden your main working environment is work from home, many are often feeling, well, how do I actually shine? How do I make sure that the powers to be, my managers, um, would actually know that I'm performing? Do they know that I'm performing? So that's another anxiety and stress level that employees have now. Is do my bosses actually know that I'm working hard? So from that perspective, I think employees would actually really would like to know how they measure and how they're actually performing, so that they themselves know where their career is headed. And I think many organizations are probably struggling with that, because as we've sort of said at the beginning, we're working towards a new norm. I don't think we're at a new norm yet, and I don't think we're going to be at a new norm until well and truly past COVID, because I see organizations come out to make statements to say that they'll be working from home for forever, kind of a thing, and I think that's a really big statement to make. I think we're probably more at the halfway mark, or we're probably past the halfway mark of that tunnel, but I think we're obviously still in that COVID tunnel at the moment. But particularly for the millennials and the graduates that's coming into the workforce as well, because I think their um, uh, I guess their career perception is different to the Gen Xers and the baby boomers, because I think they're less focused or inclined about that career-led climb, and their perception of career is probably a little bit more horizontal, and it's probably more about knowledge base. So I think it's important, when you're talking about careers, to actually tailor your programs according to the demographic of your workforce.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Certainly at Entimo, one of the important things that we preach is the need to personalize employee experiences, personalize performance, personalize incentives, and exactly as you mentioned, personalize careers, and
Absolutely, and more so important now, right? Because you've got your workforce that's completely scattered now from a location point of view, because they're not even in the one office building anymore. So yeah, very important.
Yeah, so I think more than ever, it's there's a need to look at um, data points that you may not pick up just from seeing each other in the office. Right now, we've got to figure out new data points that will help both the employee know whether they're performing, and as well as for their bosses to know how their career is
Absolutely,
going.
yeah, absolutely.
And just on the last point, Andrew, you touched a little bit about millennials. What are your thoughts, on this cultural gap, or seemingly cultural gap between the company leadership, who may be baby boomers, and this workforce that for many years now have been consisting of millennials, and what's the difference in perception or style? You talked about horizontal rather than vertical, but are there any? What other differences do you observe? Between the two groups, and how do we manage
Well,
them?
I don't know about seemingly, because I think that that gap is definitely wide, and deep. Particularly amongst boomers, and graduates and millennials, because and I think particularly with something like COVID that's happened, and we go back to work from home. Um, that's probably magnified that gap even further, because I think millennials had always sort of had that inclination to be more flexible with how they work. You know, this is how the whole the gig mentality has been, I guess, vibrant for years now. Versus the traditional working models of your boomers and even your Generation X's. So, you know, I think with the older workforce and older management, they still want to know that, you know, at 9 o'clock you're sitting behind your desk and you know you've got your laptop on and you're dressed up and ready to you know take any calls and any Zoom calls right up until about 6 p.m. But does that actually make sense? Do you actually need to do that? Because the flexibility model based around KPIs and performance management measurements, you know, you could be far more effective if your hours are staggered away from your traditional 9 to 5 or your 9 to 6s. And I think that's probably one of the biggest disconnect that I see is the rigidity of time. So there's from what I've seen, yeah, big disconnect between your traditionalists, your traditional managers who still sort of demand that you sort of clock in, but nowadays you clock in via WhatsApp or you know or a Zoom call, you know, a morning meeting. But how do you actually measure their performance beyond that, beyond just checking in, right? So that's probably the biggest challenge that I've seen that I see between the boomers and the millennials is just their working styles.
So, yeah, so it sounds like you know, it sounds like the pandemic has smashed, you know, has done the millennials a big favor.
Yeah, it probably has. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly it's certainly rocked the foundation of many organizations. It was slowly chipping away anyway. Pre-COVID, it was certainly chipping away, and it was. But now COVID has sort of just put a sledgehammer through its foundation, and a lot of companies are just really sort of finding their way through. You know, how to actually deal with a new normal and post-COVID.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Andrew. Really appreciate you joining our speaker series, and thank you to everyone for listening in to this talk. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone.